which I did do, and it was absolutely growing like mad, and full of leaf and perfectly healthy. And actually, from being in a 3-inch pot with roots that went 4 foot down to the ground, it actually went into a pot that was even shallower than this pot. And we'll see actually when I get this cleaned off that an absolutely typical example of good Japanese bonsai is that the only big roots are the ones that form the nabari. If the root system's been properly maintained over a period of years, the only roots will be the ones that we're beginning to expose here by getting the moss off the nabari. And then once we get underneath the surface of the soil, with a bit of luck, we shall find nothing but fibrous roots like we can see there. This isn't actually a perfect nabari, but it's still not bad. Here's a root here that's not really nice. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that there's anything underneath it. If there was another similarly sized root immediately under here, it might be a really good idea to remove that root, but it's looking to me as though it may not be such a good idea to do that. One of the things it says on my notes that before you start doing this, you have a really good look at your root ball to see, make some judgment about how things have been working, whether there's any sign of root rot. Just quickly have a look, before you start this, and that's what I did just now, just to check that everything seems in order, that all that's really appropriate for this tree today is to have all of the undesirable growing medium. It's undesirable, as I've already said in this case, because it's really just a little bit too fine, and as a consequence it's just holding a little bit too much moisture, and that there's not really anything else wrong with the root ball at all. Certainly nothing wrong with the pot. I actually really approve of the pot. A lot of British and European people don't like glazed pots for trees at all. Okay, so choosing pots is a personal thing, but you're often going to be wrong. I'm not, honestly, I'm not somebody who is very prone to blowing my own trumpet, but I will make an exception in this case and say that I think I'm pretty good at choosing pots for trees. Way better than my teacher, Marco Invenizzi. And he would die if he heard me say that.
Won't show much video then.
It's one of the few things we do actually genuinely disagree about, really. He's not surprisingly, really, it's a subject that he's kind of very immersed in his own teachers' ideas about the shape and size of pots. Generally I do think that you should allow people to exercise a bit of personal taste in pot selection, despite notwithstanding what I've just been saying, really. The other thing that you find particularly amongst British people, is they don't really like brightly coloured pots. I don't really mean pinks and crimsons by that, but for instance, some of the red leaf maples like Deshojo are absolutely routinely potted in Japan into quite bright blue pots. And very often you find people in this country don't like that at all, but I don't know, I think the colour contrast you get between the dark bright blue of the pot and the really bright red of the Deshojo leaves in the spring is a very attractive thing to do. And the other pot that they very often pot, particularly red leaf maples in, is this off-white or cream coloured pot. Remains of somebody's potting stick. I don't know why that's stuck in there. Presumably something to do with the wiring in. My guess is that they ran the wire across here from hole to hole and it was slipping off the root ball initially. So they hammered in the end of a stick as tightly so that that stopped the wire from slipping this way off the thing. That would be my guess. That's why it's there.
Can that root go, Peter?
Pardon?
Can that root go?
I don't know yet, really. Probably. I need a little bit more excavation. I'm beginning to think it might. The only unfortunate thing, apart from that, is that I'm looking at the front of the tree here, and the buttressing is, really nice, a beautiful part of the tree, and the buttressing comes down nicely into these, and if we cut that root off, which I think we we probably will, there's absolutely no buttressing here at all. If you look at that where my finger is, there's nothing under there, no swelling of the root of the base of the trunk.
Is there any way that can be bent in?
Well,
Okay, then next at the back to try and graft on there.
It could be. I mean, I think that make space underneath it. We could certainly pull that in. It kind of almost needs bending. That's much more difficult. I mean, at the moment, it's coming out. It's coming out from the root, from the base of the trunk, something like that. And it's not too difficult to pull it in that way, but really what it wants is to come in like that. And actually, with a piece of maple nearly 10 millimeters in the diameter, it's going to be really difficult to bend it, particularly without breaking it. But we could certainly try just guying it in, as Philip says. And we might decide that it just looks better gone. The thing is, that's the front of the tree. Now, fair enough, it's a very good policy to try and make our bonsai look good from 360 degrees. But for sure, you're always going to view this tree from what is the front of it. So in actual fact, as you can see, you can't even see that root there. There is actually some root underneath it, but it is quite a long way down. There is root here, and to be honest, it may be a better bet just simply to allow this rootage. I don't know whether anybody can see that under there. There are a couple of decent sized roots exposed there, and given a couple of millennium, they will develop into significant parts of the Nabari. But I think we'd have to think a lot more carefully about it if they were nearer the front of the tree than they are. So this method of proceeding is a pretty good method to adopt, and you would notice that I worked on the top surface of the root ball initially a couple of times going all the way around. When not so appropriate with such a well-developed tree as this, But with a lot of your own material, bonsai, still well on the way to, lots and lots of development to do, you may be seeking to move it into a shallower pot, having initially put it into something a good bit deeper than it really looked good in, just simply because you were reluctant, rightly so, to remove too many roots initially, and you were concerned to keep it nice and healthy. Even through the development stage, though, there's no mileage, there's no real advantage in encouraging any root growth to go downwards. Partly because we'll, with the possible exception of the styles of tree like cascade and semi-cascade, where the tree is coming down over the side of the pot, they inevitably need quite a deep pot. But for the vast majority of our bonsai, they're always going to go into a relatively shallow pot, but I mean 3 inches. It's still relatively shallow. So there's absolutely no reason, no sensible reason, to encourage roots to go downward into a new pot. And one way that you would be surprised how often you can reduce the depth of the pot that you want to pot into, or you could pot into, is actually to take depth away from the top surface. You'll be surprised how often it's perfectly safe to do that with the kind of material that we're talking about. And in the course of doing that, you will often expose a better nabari than you thought you had in the first place, which is a pretty good reason for at least spending the initial part of this exercise in doing what I've done, and actually just going around 2 or 3 times on the top surface. You notice that I worked in a radial way with the potting stick, and I haven't actually so far ventured to use the hook. I may have to, I may not to. The cruder your root ball is, I say the closer it is to still being as the root ball was when you dug it up from your garden or whatever, the more likely are you going to need to use a root hook to actually get the root ball opened up. If you've got a really thick tangled juniper root from something that's been in a garden for 20 years, I really wouldn't suggest that you spend your whole time picking at it with a chopstick. Yeah, nothing there. If you want to do that, then you can, but it's probably not the right tool to do the job. With this tree, I was already anticipating that it would have the sort of root ball that I would expect from a pretty good Japanese tree, and I've not really been disappointed, except perhaps with the quality of the nabari at the back of the tree. I actually, without any stupid exaggeration, if this had more of what the Japanese might consider to be a perfect nabari, then it wouldn't be at all surprising to find the tree twice as expensive. Even with everything else on the tree being the same, the quality of the trunk and the quality of the branch structure, which is actually pretty good. I'm pretty certain that, for most of us that deal in bonsai, it's not quite true with this tree, but with most of the trees that we deal in, our selling price is not something that's been thought of out of blue air. The selling price is just simply based on what we pay for it. It's exactly the same as when you go to buy a new television at Curry's. Curry's paid X amount for the television from the factory. They want to make Y amount of profit, and so the selling price comes to Z. So with bonsai, I buy them at a certain price. By and large, I put a markup on them, and I sell them. Occasionally, I might buy a tree and think, blimey, I've got a really good bargain there, I can make a little bit more money out of that. But more often than not, I'll actually buy a tree because I like it and then realise that I've paid too much money for it, and actually I sell it and make a profit, but I don't make the profit that I might have anticipated that I would normally do. I know that the big retailers will almost certainly have a fixed amount of profit margin that they normally work to, but there's one thing Willowbog Bonsai is known for, and it's not being very businesslike. But as the guy I've just sold the big Chinese elm to said, God, you're lucky doing that. And I am, you know, I freely admit that. I freely admit.
He couldn't fit it in the car. Couldn't fit it in the car.
Couldn't fit it in the car.
In the wee mark, wee sports mark.
Oh. So is he coming back for it, or you're going to do it right?
On the way home. Do it on the way home.
Diversification for you. Sell estate cars as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
No.
Or trailers.
Running on.
Trailers.
trailers and no good for bonsai. Absolutely.
Trailers.
You're alright, that's you. No, it's not.